Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Our Eyes on Indie. My name is Finn, and it is my absolute pleasure to finally give you our review of Sea of Stars. This is a game that not only was I incredibly excited for, I was incredibly excited to play, and then about halfway through playing, I broke my wrist, and so then I kind of went on a bit of a hiatus and a break, but I have finally finished the game, and I can confidently say that Sea of Stars is wonderful. Before anything else in this review, understand that Sea of Stars is 100% worth your time. It is definitely worth the $34.99 price tag. Doesn't matter what platform you're playing on, it is absolutely worth your time. But for those of you that don't know what Sea of Stars is, let's go ahead and break it down and get into the review. Because Sea of Stars is a classics-inspired, turn-based RPG. It's very similar to Chrono Trigger or the old-school Mario RPG with how it plays. It is awesome. It is so good. It's developed by Sabotage Studios, the same people that brought us The Messenger, which is also a fantastic game. So, with that said, you already know the game's great, but let's talk about why this game is so great. So, any RPG is not complete without a good story, and Sea of Stars has a very good story. Now, you start off simple enough. The whole basic premise is you live in a world where there are solstice warriors and the minions of the Fleshmancer. The whole thing is narrated at the beginning by this immortal alchemist who sits in an archive. And he sits there and he's telling you the story about Zale and Valir, the two solstice warriors. Solstice warriors are people that are born on the summer and winter solstice. They are not guaranteed to be born every single year, but when they're born, the Great Eagle takes them to Moon Cradle Island, where after a little bit of time and growing up, they are sent to the academy high above the island and learn how to be solstice warriors to take on the minions of the Fleshmancer, specifically Dwellers, which are these terrible beasts that all have different powers they can do. Some of them do mind control, others are able to hold down things and prevent powers from being active, but all the same, they can only be affected by solstice magic during an eclipse. So, Zale and Valir train for years, and once you get to that point, you are off on your adventure to take down a Dweller and to bring peace to the world. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes on, but I'm not going to spoil, but understand that the twists and turns that this game gives are wonderful. This game is going to have you laughing at certain times. It's going to have you crying at certain times. It certainly had me tearing up during a specific part later on, and it is great. And the characters are also great. I say this with a little bit of hesitancy because I found Zale and Valir to not be very interesting as main characters. But Garl, your best friend, who you're going to meet early on, is definitely the best character in this game, okay? Garl is awesome. And if you don't think Garl's awesome, then I don't know what you're doing. Alright, you're also going to meet some other fantastic side characters that will join you on your journey. I'm not going to spoil who they are, but they're all done fantastic. Some are funny, some are serious. It's all great. The side characters are the real showstoppers of this game. Not so much Zale and Valir, though, which is a little bit of a bummer. I was expecting a lot of, like, hey, you know, they're these solstice warriors and all that. And while they do have some decent dialogue here and there, overall, I didn't connect with them as much as I did any of the side characters. You could chalk that up to they've pretty much just been together learning how to be solstice warriors for most of their lives, but at the same time, I would have liked a bit more from those characters. Also, some cool things with the story. If you've played The Messenger is actually in the same world as Sea of Stars, though it takes place thousands of years after the story of Sea of Stars. Do you need to have played The Messenger to play this game? No, you definitely don't. But it's cool to see a couple references here and there and be like, oh, wait a minute, is that this? Oh, that's that, isn't it? It's really cool to be able to pick those things out, but not feel pressured should you have not played their previous game. Again, it's a prequel story if you really want to connect it together, but it's also perfectly great as a standalone. Now, visually, the game is incredibly stunning with some fantastic pixel art. If you don't know me, I love pixel art, and Sea of Stars is some of the best pixel art you will ever see. It is just nuts. The characters look great. The environments are stacked. Alright, all the little things, all the nice little animations here and there. And it also has that really nice little classic RPG thing where some animations are used for like multiple things. where it's like, oh, this character does this thing, it could be for this thing. But it's always easy to tell what that animation is implying, right? And that's that one little fun touch of like, this is still a classic inspired game, so we're going to do this instead of having exact animations for everything. But it's just wonderful. I love it. It's so detailed. It's so great. The first time you look at the overworld map, you're like, wow, this looks awesome. Or just every single time you're walking around an environment and you're looking around going, oh, can I go there? You probably can in a sense, but just the way you can tell right away, I can go there, I can't go there. What is this? What's that? And all of it blending together so well, and as the game goes on, the different environments are drastically different in a lot of ways. You go from, in the beginning, Moon Cradle's this very, like, nice, peaceful, rocky place, going to a swampy area later on. You've got dry lands, you've got water-based areas. It is all fantastic looking, and it's all perfectly backdropped by the soundtrack in this game. Oh my word. The soundtrack in Sea of Stars is just out of this world. It is so good. It is something that as soon as I got done playing the game, I was like, I need to go and find the soundtrack and listen to it. Especially the final boss music is awesome. All the music is fantastic. Every single combat, every single boss fight, the special boss fight musics, the environments. And what's even cooler is there are actually alternate versions of these songs for day and nighttime, which is a big mechanic in this game, for puzzles, as well as some nice tavern jaunt versions that come up later. When you're in the tavern areas, you're going to have different versions of some of the tracks in the game. And it is so cool. It is just so cool. And I love it. Every single track in this game is phenomenal. And honestly, I want to go and listen to it right now while I'm recording this. But obviously, that's a little hard to do while you're talking. Alright, let's get talking to the gameplay here, because a turn-based RPG is something I love a ton. I played a ton of different Final Fantasy, I played Trails games, I've played Sea of Stars now, and I gotta say, Sea of Stars does it so incredibly well here. Alright, first and foremost, I want to give a huge shout out to this being like Chrono Trigger, where the battles happen at the location you're at. The enemies sometimes jump out, or they're already there, they get in positions, your guys get in positions, and it happens at that location, and that's just something I love so incredibly much, instead of, oh, now we're on, like, this battle arena, which, like, sure, it kind of looks like where we're at, but it's not exactly where we're at. I just love it. It's one of those fun little details I've always enjoyed, especially when I went back and played Chrono Trigger. It's just wonderful, and it enhances the experience so much for me. But obviously, this is a turn-based game, so you take your turns, and your enemies take their turns, but in a slightly different way, alright? So enemies are going to have a little clock that shows above their head with it counting down. Some enemies have a speed version up of that clock. How it works is every time you take an action, that clock ticks down. When that clock reaches 0, the enemy is going to do their attack. The difference with the speed ones is those ones will go to no matter what happens, whereas the ones that are not speed ones don't have all these little leniencies of they'll always tick down. Now, the other big thing with enemies and how they work is enemies have special abilities as well. And when those abilities happen, they're going to get lock icons above them. And this is very similar to Octopath Traveler. If you've played Octopath Traveler, which is one of my favorite games of all time, up there with Persona 5, it has that same kind of style of we're going to break a weakness to then be able to do more. But in this, instead of dealing more damage like Octopath Traveler or Persona 5, instead it's going to stop that ability entirely. Now, this is both good and bad in terms of how easy it is for you, alright? Sometimes it's like, okay, I have 3 turns to break this, that's easy enough to do. Sometimes you have 1 turn and it is impossible to break it, alright? You're just going to have to suck it up and eat that ability, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world, because this game also has the active button system, alright? So what that means is whenever you're hitting an enemy with an attack, you can push a button at the right time, and your attack will not only deal more damage, but hit a second time. So if, for example, an enemy has slash as one of their locks and you use Zale, who uses a sword, you're going to slash and get rid of one lock. If you hit the button at the right time, you'll get rid of the second lock as well. This goes for all attacks, it goes for abilities, it also goes for blocking. If you are able to hit the button at the right time when an enemy attack lands, you're going to reduce the damage you take. It is fantastic. I love the active system in games like this because it makes it so I'm not just sitting there and watching it. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy watching animations play out, but it's nice to be more actively involved as the fight is going on. Now, also with this, abilities have a whole bunch of varying things for how they work. Sometimes it's a hold to charge, sometimes, for example, with Valier's, her Moonerang, which is one of her base abilities, you're going to be playing Pong, essentially, and you have to deflect the Moonerang back to the enemy. You can get this thing going incredibly fast if you get skilled with it, and I found it really effective against single targets. It was awesome, and I got so incredibly good with it, especially as I continued to play the game. Your other characters are, of course, going to have different abilities. You're going to have a total of 6 different party members that you come across throughout the entirety of the game. All of them are unique, they all do different things, and oh, that makes me remember the leveling up in this game is one of the most interesting level up systems I've ever seen. And I say that because it's not individual characters that level up, it's just your whole team levels up. By the end of the game, I got to level 20, in case you're wondering about what level you might look to end the game at. And throughout that, every time you level up, every single member of your party levels up. You then get some stat buffs, obviously, but you also get a selection of different stats that you will pick one of to get an extra increase. So for Zale, I went with just a straight up attack. He's a blade dancer, he's fast. I'm going to make sure he just attacks all the time. And so he was my big damage dealer. Then I made it so Garl was my tank. I gave him a ton of physical and magic defense as well as extra max HP. And that worked out really well for me. So it's a really great system where I don't have to worry about, oh man, like this character isn't getting enough XP, I gotta go grind. I never got to a point where I felt like I needed to grind or go back and fight other fights. But to be fair, I also made sure to take just about every single fight I came up against unless I was retrekking through an area, which, just saying, I did mainly for my own purposes and not because the game made me retrek through areas. And again, like I said earlier, the bosses, I talked about the music, but man, the boss fights in this game are great. Some of them are kind of meh in terms of they're not super crazy cool, but others are super awesome. Alright, I'm not going to spoil any of them, of course, but just know that bosses are really, really cool in this game. Now, you're also going to be doing exploring, and when exploring in an RPG like this, there are, of course, things to collect. There are chests to find with all sorts of things. Collectibles like rainbow conchs. There are going to be music sheets, trivia sheets, all these different things you can collect, and of course gear. The gear in this game, it's pretty simple. I ran into a couple of specific items that were like, oh, this is not only a better weapon, but also deals extra damage to a certain enemy type. And then you have some trinkets you can equip as well. Some of them are going to be these golden ones that are these big party passive ones, which are really cool. And then you also have very specific ones. And if you're an RPG fanatic and you like going for ultimate weapons and trinkets, there are a couple in the game you can go and find. And I gotta say, they're not super difficult to get, which is wonderful. I love it when I don't have to go completely out of my way to go and find these things, because I still want to experience them without having to spend a whole bunch of extra time for one little thing. Also, you're going to be exploring around the overworld map. You're going to get the ability to do that fairly early on in the game, and just being able to go around the world to all the different islands is wonderful. And then later on, and this is something I want to encourage you, you're going to unlock an even faster way to get around the world and to be able to go to places much easier than you could before. So if you want to backtrack in this game, wait until you get to that point, because it's going to make it not only so much easier, but a lot less time consuming. Because there was a point where I told myself, man, I want to backtrack and find all these things that I wasn't able to get to before, but I really don't want to have to go and walk through this particular area just to get to the other side of this particular area. And then I unlocked this thing, and it was fantastic. And I was like, okay, they understand exactly what it means to be a backtracker. Also, you have relics, which are different modifiers to the difficulty of the game. So these range all across the place. There's one you get early on that makes it so you can experience this game as just a story game and not have to worry about any of the fighting really. It gives you 100% extra HP. It makes it so that you're essentially playing on easy mode, like extreme easy mode. You've got that. You've got things that make it so merchants cost less money. You've actually got ones that make it more difficult. It's really cool. I like it. I like being able to find these relics and go, okay, I've got this. Do I actually want to change it up? I think the only relic I actually ended up using was the merchant one, just so I had that 10% discount, because gold is kind of hard to come by and I didn't feel like, oh, running around finding gold. And to be fair, I didn't buy much from the shops. I would buy a weapon upgrade here and there if I saw it, but that's just for me. They're there so you can customize the difficulty to your liking. You know, as I was writing this review, I realized there's a lot of stuff I can't really talk about because I want to avoid as many spoilers as possible for you. But I wanted to actually put these mechanics at the very end here because they're also the most simple, and I wanted you to get extra excited before getting to these. And these two mechanics are very simple, like I said. First off, mana in this game. Mana is gotten back by attacking. You by default gain 3 mana back for basic attacks, and that's it. And I love it, alright? One of my things with any turn-based RPG is mana management. I always hate having to manage my mana. And that was one thing I really loved in Battle Chasers Night War and the Ruined King game, if you've played those, is the overcharge mechanic, where you gain overcharge by hitting with your basic abilities, which you can then spend as if it was mana. And I love stuff like that. I love being able to get mana back easily and not having to rely on using items or resting for it. It's just something that is really nice to me, and I wanted to give a huge shout out to that. There's also the live mana mechanic, alright? And this is similar to boosting in Octopath Traveler, which is why I brought it up earlier. How it works is you can have up to 3 charges of live mana. You gain 1 charge of live mana for each attack that you hit enemies with. And then what you're able to do is you're able to hold down the shift key if you're on mouse and keyboard, and then you boost that character up to 3 times. What boosting does is it gives your basic attacks extra damage in the form of the element type of that character. So for Zale, it's solar, for Valir, it's lunar, and so on and so forth. But it also makes it so if you use any abilities, the aspects of that ability are enhanced. If it's a damage ability, it's going to deal more damage. If it's a healing ability, it's going to heal even more. So it's a really nice little back and forth of going with these and being like, okay, do I need this? Do I need that? And the real strategy comes back to those locks. Because if I know that an enemy or a boss is going to have locks that require a certain type, let's say slashing and solar, and I don't think I'm going to have the mana to use an ability to deal with that, if I prep for that by having my other character's basic attack and then saving Zale for the end of the round when I think the lock's coming back, and then I can boost his attack and he's able to hit and deal solar damage with his attacks. It's a great little back and forth strategy that I found super engaging throughout the entire game, and certainly one of my favorite things. It was one of my favorite things in Octopath was that boost and deciding when and when not to use it, since it didn't recharge the next turn. And it's very similar here, and I love it. Also, to close out this review, for all you RPG purists out there that love a secret final boss with a true ending, Sea of Stars has one for you. And one of the best things is, it's not super crazy where it's like Persona 4, for example, where you have to say specific things at a specific moment and have a certain confidant. It's nothing like that. You don't even have to do a New Game Plus for it. I will say, all you need to do is beat the game once, a thing will happen, and you're able to go back to your save before the final fight, and then go for the secret true ending with the secret boss. Alright, so that's my only little spoiler thing for you, but just for you RPG purists out there that really, really love these secret bosses, it's in here and it's great. Highly recommend going back and doing that. My total playtime for the first roll credits for the regular ending was about 25 hours. And then after that, I spent a little bit of extra time, so it clocked in at around almost 30 total, going back through to get to that secret boss and doing some other side stuff in the game I wanted to get done. So you're looking at a pretty decent chunk of time. Is this game worth playing again through for New Game Plus? I think that's entirely up to you. I might in a few years, kind of like with Persona 5 and Persona 4, it's one of those I like to come back to. It's like a comfort game for me. And so Sea of Stars, definitely one I might come and revisit. But if you couldn't tell by this point, Sea of Stars is an absolute must-buy. It's 100% one of the best indie games I have ever played. Definitely one of the best games to come out this year, no question about it. Like I said, it is available on Steam and all your platforms for $34.99. It's even on Game Pass if you have Game Pass. But with all that said, that's our review. So, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on the video, as I've got tons of reviews that I'm working on, especially now that my hand is back. I'm still working on Blasphemous 2 review, because, well, let's just be honest, playing a platformer with one hand does not work very well. But, plenty of reviews to come up. There are a lot of games coming out, so a lot of time to spend with a lot of different things. But, with all that said, my name is Finn. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll be here with our eyes on Indie.